Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Deepest Lore, where we are continuing the Adam Curtis reviewing Adam Curtis series. However, we're doing it under constrained circumstances, aren't we, Simon? Because the last two episodes have tragically been blocked by the villainous and dastardly BBC.
Boo!
And I appealed it, and usually do you remember when I did that Carry On thing?
Yeah.
And I used lots of clips from Carry On. ITV just released them all, And as far as I know, the Carry On films are on the ITV player. But if anything's actually on the BBC iPlayer, the BBC just reject outright global block because it's on the iPlayer, you see. And they're trying to protect. Regardless of the fact that we've all paid for this content and it should really belong to a public library, they try to protect, that they try to wall off anything that license fee payers gain access to. And I think it's because this one, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, that we're reviewing, is on the iPlayer, basically. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's typical, isn't it? It's, the ITV, friend of the working man. They release the ribaldry of the Carry On clips. BBC, patrician elite, no.
You can't have commentary on Adam Curtis on YouTube. So anyway, our workaround for this, which is the best thing that we could come up with, is that you're going to have to, when we start reviewing it, everybody watching on YouTube is going to have to jump across to Twitter X. Maybe this was a ploy by Big Elon. Maybe Big Elon has people inside the BBC who are like, go on, let's try to get everybody over to watching streams on X. But you see, watching streams on X is not as good as it, because you can't have the chat. What else can't you have on Twitter X? It's just not the same.
It's just not the same. It's not the same water cooler moment, event TV that we like to specialize in. We only came here to inform, educate, and entertain, didn't we?
Anyway, as a result of that, I'm putting if you have a look in the show notes, refresh it if you haven't, there is a link to where you can watch on X, right? And I would go over there now, open it in a tab, because after we've finished the banter, we're going to be going over there.
Does that require people to start a Twitter account in order?
No, I think I'm pretty sure you don't have to be a member
that's
to
good.
click on the link. I believe I'm going to try that now in an incognito tab to see what happens. Do you want to? Okay, go to site. Yes, I'm currently not logged in, and I'm still watching it. So you don't have to join Twitter X to watch on there. But that's how we're going to have to do it from now until the end, I'm afraid, because I'm pretty sure that all of the remaining Curtises are on iPlayer, aren't they?
Yes, I actually think this one isn't on iPlayer. I checked the listings last night, but there is a problem with this documentary for some reason. He has alluded to it in an interview. He's said something about, the BBC considers me saleable now. And this was at this point in 2011. And so their lawyers have been very assiduous in taking this particular documentary down. I don't know why. Given that we've done so many others.
I wonder what it is he gets into here that is, the BBC don't like.
Yes. Climate agenda, and then the next one's about the wars in Rwanda, civil war in Rwanda. So,
Interesting.
sort of racial ethnographies and climate controversies, maybe. Who knows? These
But
are
just before we bring in our special guest, our subject matter expert here, I'll just remind people to buy courses at the Academic Agency, Foundations of Shakespeare. Buy it now. I've been dissatisfied with the advert, Simon, for some reason,
yeah.
and so somebody contacted me saying, "Oh, let me try and make one, Gov. Put me in, Chief."
Hmm.
And ever the Sir Alex, I was like, "All right, get your jersey on. Let's see what you can do." So let's see if a fan made one was better than. I haven't been able to get it right for some reason.
I think I maybe it's my voiceover. You need to give actors direction, because you can only, if somebody gives you text, you can only do a kind of flat declarative kind of reading until somebody comes and amps you up and says, I want it like this, put more energy in that word, do this, do that, and then you could zing it up to the level you want, because you have a real great fantastic aggressive style in your announcements that's also kind of 90s kind of hard sell, and it's
Well,
funny.
I'm channeling Vince McMahon, of course,
Yeah.
and there's an amazing kind of inside the WWF documentary they made years ago,
Yeah.
where these prospective wrestlers are coming in trying to work for Vince McMahon,
Yeah.
and it's just like a fly on the wall. So you get to see Vince doing this pep talk and like, telling them how to do their promo, right? And there's this one character, I don't think it ever became a thing. It's just like an audition, and the wrestler's gimmick is going to be that he pukes, right? That he's sick everywhere, right? And Vince is just like in his face, "You're puke, say it, puke," like that, and he makes the guy like be sick in front of him to try to get this job. And I don't think he gives him the job either, but it's an incredible bit of thing to see. Vince McMahon was clearly a madman. But anyway,
it's the sort of energy you would have had in the 90s for like a carpet showroom kind of thing. It would be like, Foundations of Shakespeare, $9.99 a square meter, buy it now. It's that kind of radio voice sort of thing.
Yes. Oh, where's Ben gone?
No, he's dipped. I'll just get him to come back in.
We'll have to keep that. We're going to have to keep that banter going until he comes back.
Yes.
Well, as people are coming in, I will just reiterate. In a minute, we're all going to leave YouTube and go to Twitter X for the remainder while we watch this documentary. But first of all, let's welcome our special guest, Ben Pyle. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Ben?
Hello, thanks for having me, and hello, Simon. And well, I'm not sure where to start. I guess I should point out you've very generously called me a domain expert of some kind. I'm not a scientist and I'm not an economist. I've just been tracking this a little bit too closely for 20 years or so. And prior to that, I was probably something of a proto-Greta in my youth. I was a bit of a green, and I'm quite keen on all of this stuff. But of course, as many people do, I came to reflect on like the problems and some of the weirdnesses that are very evident in the green perspective, and so that's made me unemployable and unpopular, and quite keen to sort of see this thing shut down, really, and move on from this green. These sort of utopian green ideas, and I was quite different. I think there's a lot of confusion about what it means to be critical of the Greens. A lot of people sort of equate that immediately with skepticism of climate science and global warming. But actually, I think we, and this is why I was drawn to Adam Curtis in the first place. Actually, it's about those deeper ideas, finding out where the historical roots of those ideas were, because it doesn't begin and end with climate science, as many people want you to believe.
Am I right in believing, Ben? Because I mean, when I say subject matter expert, you know more than me, or most people watching this, or most people like you're probably in the top 1 percentile of because most people know nothing about anything, right? All I've got is a few kind of bits of skepticism about how models work and things like that. But am I right in thinking that many of the people who are quote unquote skeptics in this space actually start as Greens or conservationists, or are kind of people who are that way inclined? I remember David Bellamy from my youth. You know, he was famous for being a greenie and a conservationist and a nature expert. And, you know, he started saying, well, there's something not quite right here, and was famously, jettisoned from the airwaves. There was, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the founder of Greenpeace,
Patrick Moore,
if memory serves, I mean, he was like the founder of this organization, and he is one of the leading skeptics. So is that like a fairly common trajectory that you're not like being sent by big oil or something? You're actually people who started off as Greens, who then like figured out something wasn't quite right here. Is that right?
No. I always say I wish we were funded by big oil, because that would make things really easy. But no, it's complete. That's complete mythology. But yeah, absolutely. Everyone. Well, I know. Let's say 75% of the journalists, the scientists, the engineers who sort of speak out on this, I think probably did come from. I actually thought about did come from sort of the orthodox position in the first place, and then something happens, some kind of like mini trauma shakes their view of things. So someone like Matt Ridley, for example, science writer, former, and he resigned from the Lords recently, but he speaks about how he in the 80s he was writing about this as the story was emerging, and then something changes. I thought it would make a really good book, actually, to sort of to compile all of these things, all of these stories of people who have started out on the green side and writing about it or being involved in it, and then changing their mind, because those are far more, those like mini epiphanies are far more interesting than the skepticism itself, if you see what I mean. Like how much more revealing as well of like the burden that the green movement puts on free, I could call it free speech, but the press, the imperative to conform to this stuff, and that in itself, I mean, is a reason for climate skepticism, and it drives a lot of people. They go, well, why are you being so censorious? Why are you so terrified of objections to these ideas? And that in itself is a recruiting sergeant for climate skepticism, and Greens just don't understand that dynamic.
I mean, my understanding of science, call me old-fashioned, is the spirit of free inquiry, right? So it doesn't like there shouldn't.
You crazy man.
Is it not? Like, I mean, whatever the data says, and everybody should be able to see the same thing.
Oh, you'll be talking about intellectual freedom next.
You Foucauldian, you Simon, who postmodern. You're one of those woke writers, I can tell. Now, the last thing, I mean, I remember one of the guys I stumbled on when I briefly looked into this some years back. I made a meme called "Address the Balloon Data," right, when I had a run-in with Potholer many years ago, Ben, and because I made a video on the Maldives, which is still up, because I was like, what it was is that I did a lot of economics stuff back in the day. I still occasionally touch on economics on the channel, and I noticed that there was a pile of headlines saying that the Maldives government was investing in like a 30-year building project, right? And then at the same time, there was a headline saying, well, Maldives is going to be under the sea in 30 years. And I was just like, what company invests in something with that much risk? Like, you don't put a multi-million dollar project to invest in buildings in an area that, a whole like project in an area that's going to be under the sea in 30 years. And so I called it the Maldives mystery, and this drew the attention of Potholer. And then, in my various researches, trying to see what he was coming up with, I came across a guy who was in charge of balloon temperature readings or whatever. He kind of collected. Are you aware of this guy I'm talking about? I think he was actually in charge of the temperature readings like across America or something. This guy, and he's since become an apostate.
No, that doesn't ring a bell. Is Potholer the tuber with? He's got a slightly uptight, slightly plummy. Mode of speech.
So Potholer is a kind of pro, like he protects the narrative, if you want to put it that way.
Consensus enforcement, I call it. Yeah.
And this balloon data guy, I think he's fairly famous, but he was coming at it from a different angle, and he was saying that like he's testified before Congress and stuff like that before. This was during like Trump 1.0, where if you remember, Trump was like, "Oh, we're going to have a proper conversation about this," and the one of the experts that he called was this guy who had like balloon data, saying like, "Well, look, if you look at the temperature readings of all of these, it doesn't show what you guys are saying." It's like, well, you were saying, well, if you go to like the hottest bits, you have to, it has to be constant, right? So you have to take the data from these balloons. And well, this Potholer chap had a lot of pretty like fierce disciples who were coming after me, and I just kept on saying, address the balloon data, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't address, and it became a bit of a meme anyway.
Those consensus enforcers, I just don't find them very bright. I mean, I'll do often ask them if they can even read, because like, it is very simple propositions that they can't grasp in like, their main aim, I think, is disruption. Running interference kind of projects, and they're only really good at regurgitating orthodoxy. They only really, you say something and it's like they see a few keywords and then they post Guardian clippings, or sometimes you get scientific journals, and it just turns into a sort of a mudslinging thing, right? There's no good faith. They're just determined that you're wrong, and they're just going to overwhelm you with these cut and paste jobs. They're not actually trying to get to anything, because ultimately what their argument is that you must eschew your own faculties of reason, because who do you think you are in the face of the IPCC? And I wield the power and authority of the IPCC. And it doesn't matter that you could actually quote from the IPCC and as a counter to any of their claims. There's no real. It's beyond language, right? They're not really engaging with the words in front of them. They're not impressive. They're just persistent. They've got a lot of energy, and a lot of them, I think, are kind of very disappointed late stage academic scientists who haven't really done a great deal, and climate is like a bit of a sport for them in some way, sort of fulfilling. And I don't mean to be too mean about them, but I've never been impressed by their abilities to engage in good faith at all. It seems to be a characteristic that they're the opposite.
Yeah, well, they certainly did not address the balloon data. I remember that. And I mean, the thing is that even back then, I had some pretty I also had my own followers and so on. And so there was just like a clash of all of these greenies against followers of mine, just repeatedly over and over saying address the balloon data. Just the last thing before we head over to Twitter X and start the documentary. My video earlier on today was about Trump's speech at Davos, and he was pretty fierce on the whole green agenda. He was pretty like, we're going to start drilling again. All of this, we're putting out the Paris Accords, where he's just sounded like he was pulling the plug on it and saying like, America's back, baby, and we're going to be a manufacturing powerhouse. In your assessment, somebody who's followed this space for a long time, how much damage is Trump going to do to the agenda in the next 4 years? Like, can he produce lasting damage, or is the regime just going to say like, well, we can wait this out, basically?
Well, I hope he can do the damage. The real kick in the balls for the Greens was the ESG stuff, so which he didn't even need to initiate. A lot of money, a lot of states, AGs were going after ESG companies, looking for evidence of collusion, and that really has spooked the these huge hedge funds and so on, and financial institutions, and so they're sort of pulling the rug out really. But ESG, which is kind of the main climate, what would you call it, front line at the moment, is mostly a European phenomenon. And so, because the idea of a one size fits all, emissions reduction policy, that's kind of last decade. That sort of was obviously dead a decade ago, and the emphasis since then has been on, can we use the financial system to regulate emissions? So and that's what ESG is about. But that hasn't been as successful as people had hoped. Like that, there was talk at like that COP meeting in Glasgow, the climate meeting in Glasgow, with Boris Johnson and co sort of beating their chests about how Britain was leading the world in this stuff. That's really been about finance. And how can you finance the rest of the world's green development, sustainable development, and how can you use financial financial institutions to sort of limit their services to oil and gas companies, basically. So you can't get any credit if you're a hydrocarbon thing, and that goes all the way to the debanking of Farage. Frankly, when you look at it in its fullest extent. So an insurance company is not going to underwrite an oil well, or or shipping and so on and so forth. That was the intention, but the Americans have been pulling out of that, and it remains to be seen how Europe's going to respond to that. And we've just had Rachel Reeves this morning saying, net zero is the mainstay of the growth agenda, which means there is no growth agenda, basically. So I don't know. I think last time Trump did it, the European Union said, we don't care that America is pulling out of the Paris Agreement. We're going to join forces with China to create this sort of like low carbon coalition, and then like China just increases over that term. China's CO2 emissions increased by like 30%, something ridiculous. Whereas and then Europe's diminished it, and that's because all of the European policy creates a massive market for Chinese wind turbines and solar panels and so on. And so Xi goes, thank you very much. And that's exactly the sort of thing that Trump observes. And that's exactly the sort of reality that Europeans are just really good at sort of ignoring somehow. So I guess it remains to be seen. Sorry to be disappointing. I'm not going to try and read the future, but I think this time it's going to have a much deeper resonance around the world, and I think Canada will follow more likely when they get rid of Trudeau finally, because of course they're going to put Mark Carney in as his interim replacement.
Wonderful chap, as we all know from this country.
Yeah, our former Bank of England manager, of course, and so that will probably create a lot of reactance in Canada, and I think clearly the geopolitics have shifted. So that was 10, 20 years ago. You've got British diplomats scuttling off to Moscow and Beijing saying, "Oh, you've got to join the climate thing," and these sort of Russians saying, "What the hell are you talking about? We experience temperatures of minus 50. Global warming isn't that kind of problem we really need to address." But of course, can you imagine a British delegation of climate diplomats sort of landing in Moscow now? They're not going to get a very warm welcome, even if they went in July rather than January, right? So the geopolitics is completely different, and you're not going to get Iran, you're not going to get India, you're not going to get China, you're not going to probably get Brazil if that changes hands, and so all those BRICS countries have sort of given up on the West I mean, that might be overstating BRICS, but anyway, I think what I'm getting at is I think net zero and the climate agenda is pretty much dead on the global stage, and it's going to have to reformulate. Trump has just sort of eased it on a bit.
I did find out who the balloon data guy was, by the way, and apparently he's the Republicans' favorite skeptic, John Christie. This guy with the big mustache.
Oh yeah.
Here. He is the balloon data guy.
Well, he's satellites. Satellites.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But satellites, but they call it balloon data for some reason.
Oh,
right. But he was the one who drew attention to that. He presented it to Congress basically, and what he testified in front of Congress was that he thinks there have been manipulations of that data, or that data doesn't show what they, anywhere near the sorts of rises in temperatures that they claim. I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of it, but he was the guy anyway. All right, now I can see that there are still 350 people watching on YouTube, 360 now, but there are over 1,000 watching on Twitter.
Wow!
So all of those people on Twitter, all of those people on YouTube, right? You need to go over to X. I don't know if we want to have a chorus or something, Simon. You need to go over to X. I don't know how to get over there.
I'm going to strike the bell. Today I won't be saying pause. I've got in Mr. D style, I've got a physical object to create a sound. And I'm striking the bell for people to move over to Twitter now. And before we do, I'm just going to give up a big up to Ben. Do have a look at his channel, Climate Resistance, on YouTube, and have a look at some of his short films, especially about the influence of green philanthropists and civil society organizations. These are the organized minorities, if you like, in the climate world, pushing agendas that he elucidates very, very well in these short, pithy films. And I think Ben has, in his film narrations, he's the natural inheritor of the Adam Curtis voice. Actually, I may make him do an audition piece and read the intro to The Power of Nightmares when we move over to Twitter at some point. But I think he's got an interest for me because we both share a love of Adam Curtis stuff, but as well, Ben has, I think, ranged across, if it's okay to say, Ben, the sort of the spectrum of interests and ideologies in this area. You've worked with people from the ideological tradition of the left, places like Spiked, and you've worked with people on, from like Godfrey Bloom in UKIP. So if you're talking about the sort of the who funds you question, I can say, with authority that Ben is a journeyman as much as the rest of us, and there's no big oil emptying gold lucratively into his bank account. I think he is going for the value-free analysis as we like. Is that fair to say, Ben?
Yeah, that's all very kind, but if you are a big oil, please don't let that stop you.
Absolutely, bullion, diamonds, are preferred.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true journeyman mercenary, like a kind of political Nicholas Anelka, somebody like that. About 5 people who got that reference. Okay, right, 5. Right, I'm gonna start a countdown. By the end of the countdown, YouTube is going to go off air, and we're going to continue on Twitter X only. Right, the documentary is about to start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Goodbye, everyone on YouTube. Yep. Ring the bell. Ring the bell.